I'd like to call to order the Charter Township of Oxford Planning Commission regular meeting scheduled for Thursday, May 10th, 2018. Will you please rise and pay respects to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ed, can you please take note of the roll with the excuse from Mr. Curtis and Mr. Spitz?
The roll is noted.
Okay. Item 4, approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Support.
Moved by Ms. Rosner, seconded by Mr. Hunwick. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Item 5, approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Planning Commission regular meeting of April 26, 2018.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Mr. Hunwick, seconded by Mr. Knoll. Is there any discussion on the motion? I do have one correction I do want to make to the minutes. It's under the section for the Ordinance Review Committee. It's true that we went over all of that, but I wanted to make sure that the point I was making was the general audit and the schedule of uses and definitions for ag and SF2 were going to be kind of prioritized on the list or moved up.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. I was surprised it wasn't on there, but I assumed you'd do it.
So if we can make that one change to the minutes, that would be good.
I would move to amend my, nobody supported it, so.
Mr. Knoll supported.
I'll second.
If you amend it.
I made the motion.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I have to amend my motion to include the schedule of uses, land uses in the agricultural district.
Yes.
To a higher priority status?
To a higher priority status.
Right. Okay, thanks, Ken.
You amend yourself.
I'll second my second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that motion passes as well. Item 6, public comments on items not scheduled for public hearing or on this agenda. There are no people in the audience tonight. Item 7, Commissioner's comments. Mr. Knoll?
I have no comment.
Mr. Berger?
I have none.
Mr. Unwick?
No comments.
Ms. Rosner?
Maybe just a couple just observations of stuff that I've been overhearing the last couple weeks, and some of it's just kind of related to some of our ordinances. In Metamora, they had a rezoning request yesterday to rezone from R1 to Ag. And we don't see a lot of that. And so I kind of went, and I looked where it was. And when I compared their allowed uses in residential and allowed uses to ag, the same kind of thing there happens here. Is like, nobody will care if you throw it out in the country. So let's put the gravel pit and this and that in the ag zoning. And so when I looked at this property, which was pretty big, it was pretty clear the reason to zone to ag was not for ag, it was to put a use which would have been detrimental to ag there because it would have been allowed in the district.
Under a special land use or just?
Even regular.
Oh, regular.
You know, kind of the same situation. You gotta remember, special land use is a land use that's deemed suitable for that area by the very nature of what our ordinance says. So if that rezoning went through, you know, that would allow a gravel pit and some very high intense things, which is kind of the same thing that could happen here. And I never even considered reverse zoning. I'm kind of looking at the zoning we have, but it doesn't stop the property owner that has large acreage in the R zone district to say, I want to put in a compost yard or a sales lot, I want to rezone and go to ag. And since our master plan says we want to preserve this and this is kind of stuff, we have a hard fight saying no. So I just wanted to bring up that happened. I haven't heard what happened yet. I know a lot of people were upset about it because I had even contemplated that could happen. And then the other thing that's going on in Brandon, and I just got a message from Riley, who's our rep on that, is the group homes have sexual offenders in there. And it seems to be a problem, and there's no way to regulate it. And that's kind of stuff that's being looked at, and I guess it kind of just opened my eyes as to what we can zone and what we can't zone, or can and can't zone, and then even some of the areas. I hadn't even really considered it, but I guess there's a high percentage of sex offenders and stuff in those types of group homes. Just observations I'm seeing.
Okay. I have no comments this evening. I'd like to move on to our annual public hearings on item 8. Item 9, unfinished business to master plan, the third completed updated draft. We were all at the combined meeting a couple of weeks ago. Some of those changes have been incorporated. Matt, I think I'll let you lead.
Yes, sure. So we have updated it slightly. The joint meeting gave us some really good comments. One of the comments that I thought was really good and that we've added to the master plan was to kind of expand on the term village character. What does that mean? So on page 119, I added a sub information kind of box that talks about what does that village character mean, and includes design guidelines for any area that we want to include within like the village mixed use overlay that hopefully eventually will get adopted. It talks about building and site design and streetscape standards. We also, got sent a couple of just grammatical corrections from township board members that I've updated throughout the ordinance. I'm trying to think, did I include in the email I sent to you, did I include the appendix? Okay, good. The appendix is the full results of the online survey, and it will be updated to also include notices that we send out for the public hearing and notices that we send out for distribution.
I don't know if it makes a big difference or not, but in the beginning part of the master plan where it indicates where Oxford Township is located, it says we're 35 from Detroit. Doesn't indicate miles, kilometers, feet.
Just says 35?
It says 35.
Yeah, we should update that.
So
Clicks.
Yeah.
That'd be clicks.
Yeah, clicks.
35 measurement units. Okay, yeah, I'll update. I'm assuming it says miles, but I'll double check to make sure. That was in the regional context. Yeah, 35 to the southeast. Good call. And I was planning on going out and taking pictures today, but it was all cloudy and gross. So don't worry, there's gonna be pictures in here, don't worry. The next step, if you're comfortable with 90% of this, would be to forward it on to the township board for their distribution. Again, we can continue to make changes, add some minor things to it as it's out for distribution, but we have 63 days to receive comment from adjacent communities in the county.
So, what about after the 63 days? What about, in my understanding, it's a living document, right?
Well, it's a, you can amend it at any time. You can amend the master plan, and there are still public notice requirements for amendments, but it's less. I think it goes down to 42 days for an amendment minor amendments to a master plan.
Okay.
But the timeline is, once you're comfortable with this draft, make a motion to forward it to the township board for distribution as required by the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. At the township board meeting, they'll consider it. If they're not comfortable with it, they can refer it back to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
If they are comfortable for distribution, they'll make a motion to approve distribution. I will write a letter, probably put it on a CD and send it to these various communities, and as well as the county and utilities and train companies that operate within the township. They have 63 days to write back to the clerk, most likely, After that 63 days are over, we have it here, we have a public hearing. We consider those, any comments we received. You don't have to include them, but they're up for discussion. And one of two things is going to happen, and I'll have to double check. If the planning commission is the adopting body, you will, if you're comfortable with it, you can make a motion to adopt, or a resolution really, to adopt the master plan. If the township board is the final adopting body, again, you'll make a motion to recommend approval to the township board. Yeah, I think that's what it was at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So the resolution will say the planning commission recommends approval of it, and then it will go to the board for their final consideration.
Okay.
But that still, still leaves us about 3 months to make any other further changes that we like. We don't have to resend it out if we make minor changes to it. It's still going to be okay under the original notice. And then again, once that 63 days is over, you can still continue to make minor changes to it.
Okay.
But what I would ask of you right now is if there are any major changes that you see need to be made before you send to the board for distribution, bring them up now, and then we can change it. But if there are minor things you think adding one more little section of a chapter, those are items that we can address while it's out for distribution.
Okay. Okay, with that then, does anybody have any major changes that they
Well,
come across?
just going to go on record saying basically the same thing. I won't repeat it, that I said in the joint meeting, that I don't think this goes deep enough into the descriptions of what we mean by rural character and those type of things. And it's very deficient. And that same plan we have ended up with what we have. Nothing's changed other than it looks prettier. And until we change the content of it in a way that's meaningful, it really is a useless document.
Anyone else?
I guess I want to make just a brief comment. I think it's important, and even Ed mentioned something to me earlier today. What we haven't done, in my opinion, in the past is follow the master plan too well. And we talked and said we should really be following our master plan better, because time has been spent in the past to at least put us to a place, and then we don't always follow it accordingly. So with what we have in place right now, I'd just like to say, for the future, that we continue to try and follow it better, and then we are working on amending some ordinances in the township zoning book that would then help us regulate some of the things within our master plan, even though it might not have all the criteria that Callie's talking about. I think she's correct in some parts and areas that we probably should do a little better look at. We haven't spent enough time with it in depth. But for now, I guess we got to try to move forward. So I think that we're kind of tied, and our hands are tied behind our back sometimes with what we have in funds and what we're limited with. But I guess I feel like we still need to move it forward to the township board, and if there's other input from even neighboring communities or any entities that want to put comments together, I'd like to at least see if there's something else out there that people want to come forward with. So I'd be ready to make a motion to move it forward to the township board.
Okay. Yeah, my thing is we spent some time on what the future land uses are, right? I know we did that back and forth quite a bit. In my opinion, that represents mostly what we did. In my opinion. Supposedly in the next 10 years, that's the way it's supposed to remain, correct? So what you're saying, I do agree with, we should kind of reference this a little more often.
I think so.
When proposals come into us.
Well, you guys sound like me. I hate to say it, but that's what I've been saying for a long time.
Well, you know what, and it takes a while to wake up to things sometimes, but I agree. I think we haven't been following it as good as we should have in the past in some instances. And if we don't, we're not going to have the continuity of what we've been trying to create.
And if we don't follow it, we need to set a very clear and detailed set of findings on why we buried.
Right.
I agree with that.
Well, in my opinion, it's gonna, and it's gonna go that way anyway.
It's not just,
good enough.
it's not just to meet the needs of anybody wanting to come into the community and do what they want to do.
But it's
To
not
meet-
about the
Right.
best financial outcome for them.
I'm with you, I agree. I just think we probably have to move this forward to the township board for their consideration to distribute the draft and then see if any other comments come back within the next 2 to 3 months. That's about the timetable you're gonna have, 60 and 30, so 90 days. And then 60 and 40, whatever, 100 days, but, and then we'll go from there and then see what we recommend. If we're a recommending body at that point in time, that's 3 months out from now. So, we'll try and do a better job in the future.
Anything from your end?
No, I was just going to say that, Tom and I did discuss the fact that if we just follow the master plan, the vision of Oxford will, it'll take care of itself. It's our responsibility to make sure we do the right thing. And again, there's been a lot of development that's happened in the past that I scratched my head just before I came on the commission as to how come or why certain developments were allowed to be allowed or move forward with. And I think that if we as a group, are disciplined enough to follow the plan and do what we're supposed to do, I think this community will be fine.
Anything else?
Well, just to add on, I agree we need to follow, obviously, I've been saying that for a long time, but having a better description of what it means, like what is rural, is a really simple thing to do, and we're sidestepping it, saying it's too complicated. Spending an hour in a meeting that doesn't have a lot on it to discuss what do we mean by rural is not being unreasonable, especially since it really is the future of the town. When you don't fill in and color the picture, we don't have a good slate to work with. And this board's been working together for a while. We kind of know how we all feel. We're all pretty much in the same opinion on most things. But people change, boards change, and people come in. And we want them to step in and wear shoes. But we're not even telling them what side here, And that's what I'm saying. This vision is supposed to be something you can carry on, and the next person's definition, stepping in, not having an experience, will be totally different. And we're expecting them to continue with what we're doing here. And spending an hour to figure out some of these simple terms. What does rural mean? We base our entire master plan on that statement. Yet not one of you can tell me what it means.
Any other comments, concerns, questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Planning Commission forward the complete draft of the 2018 Charter Township of Oxford Master Plan dated May 2nd, 2018 to the Township Board for their consideration and approval to distribute the draft plan as required by Michigan Planning Enabling Act, Public Act 33 of 2008.
I'll second that motion.
Been moved by Mr. Berger, seconded by Mr. Knoll. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Is this a roll call?
I think so.
No, it's not a formal approval, it's just a recommendation.
Right. Seeing none, then, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 10, new business, there is none. Item 11, communications and committee reports. The EDC, they did not meet, I know that. There's a meeting possibly planned for next month. Ordinance Review Committee.
I can start, and I might need some assistance with Matt because we went through several things today, but I guess in length, two of the things that we have actually ready to move forward with are the rezoning criteria that we talked about, and the solar energy systems draft that we had originally talked about. So, and by zoning criteria, it was only a few pages. I don't know if you guys, are you familiar with what it was, what it contained? They were just minor amendments in the Article 18. So they're just word changes in most cases to put us in place of where we have to be. The master plan, including the goals and objectives, was actually revised in that comment too, under 18.2C. And then we had one of the things was that we made one slight correction on in wording was the amendment under the same section, under note number 7, was the amendment will not set an inappropriate precedence resulting in the need to correct future planning issues. We changed the wording in there, so that wording changed slightly from what was presented in that draft, but that draft is now ready to move forward under the zoning criteria amendments that were made, and then under there were several things changed under the solar ordinance, from the previous conversations that we had, and we made those changes accordingly, except there was one additional change made. It's kind of a considerable change in the sense that when you're talking about types of solar energy systems, and we had under the type 1 for ground-mounted solar energy systems in a residential district, we went to not to exceed 1,750 square feet of area in any residentially zoned parcel, or up to 5,000 feet in any agricultural or non-residential zoning district. That doesn't have to go to the planning commission, so those people could come in and put a solar energy system in under the type 1 system, and it could be done administratively, but anything beyond that then has to come to this board, commission, for review and approval. They'd have to fill out an application and come into us. So even if it's industrial, or even if it's bigger than that, residential, they'd have to come to us. We felt that we should try to restrict those sizes to smaller numbers. We originally had 10,000 square feet in there. We cut it in half, took it down to 5,000, thinking that we were giving ourselves a little bit too much leeway to approve it administratively. So that's kind of a big change on the solar energy system, except there are other changes that followed suit with almost what everybody else's comments were. And then we went into, so those two issues are actually ready to move forward as completed conditions if they move forward, solar and the rezoning criteria. And then we did move up because of the comments that were made. We did receive your email too, Mr. Young, in regards to moving up conditions regarding some of the ag properties and the R1 properties. And one thing that we spent quite a bit of consideration on tonight was we will be recommending, we don't have the drafts done yet, but we're proposing to completely remove any yard waste composting facilities in any of the ag areas. We're going to take it right out, and we're going to make sure that with the definition that we have for yard waste composting facilities, that we have the proper definition in place, and that we are going to then exclude certain home composting and composting on agricultural property unless it's for their own use, so you couldn't come in there and commercially do it. You couldn't come, unless it's in maybe an we're proposing to put it in I-1 district. So we have some things that we've been talking about and what we'll make changes on, and the ag properties you wouldn't even be able to come in under special land use to do it. We're going to take it right up. So we heard a lot of comments. Mr. Myers, Dr. Myers, was making comments at some of the meetings, so we picked up on it, And we have moved forward in those areas to try and make some changes that we'll be bringing to this commission for when we get our drafts ready.
Okay.
So we may have another meeting yet this month to try and keep continuation of work going. On the 24th, we didn't know if there would be a planning commission meeting or not. Mr. Unwick, Ed, is not going to be available on the 24th, and so I don't know if I would just meet with John, myself, and maybe meet with Matt. We might still do it anyway, so we can kind of keep things going better this summer. Get us moving in a faster direction, because we're a little behind on trying to get some revisions made.
So these two, the rezoning and the solar though, are those, you've got those ready to go to
Yeah.
to us
Yeah.
at the next commission meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
The zoning amendment, it changed, or the zoning criteria, we had looked at before the stuff that the state put out, the land use where it's a check sheet kind of thing. Is that what got integrated, or do we just?
Yeah.
Well,
Matt,
We were looking for a check sheet kind of approach.
yeah, so what our plan of action is for the zoning text amendment is to keep it, they're going to be numbered, criteria, but then utilize that to update the forms that we have and applications that we have in the office. So in terms of the text amendments, they're not going to be a checklist format. They're going to be the following criteria need to be met in order for rezoning, and then we have 8 criteria. But we want the forms and applications to be a checklist format, and also adding that we've added it as a draft or as a potential text amendment that the applicant has to respond to these criteria when submitting an application. But we can then go. The ultimate goal is then to, after these are adopted, update the forms to make it user-friendly and also clear what our standards are. But
we were looking to make sure we make a determination on each. That type of approach. I found in the past, we kind of, sometimes some people get into a rush and just follow it fines and you miss the components when you're not forced as a body to make a decision on each of the elements.
Right, and that's what was missing from the ordinance was it just says rezoning text amendment, here's the procedure, they submit, we have a public hearing, but it didn't have any guidance for either the planning commission or the applicant.
Right.
So that's what we added in, were 8 criteria, 8 standards that should be looked at when when the applicant submits a rezoning application, but then when the planning commission and township board respond to it.
Yeah, they're going to have to respond first.
I know they respond, but I'm just saying, we're going to look at it later when you have the text on, but for me, I'm looking for just that wording in there that says the planning commission shall make a finding on each.
Oh yeah, it's we have the criteria, and then right at the end it says planning commission shall report its findings of facts based on these criteria with a recommendation for action to the township board.
So what I see is a pre-written finding of fact that based on discussion, not at all. Not that we actually have to make a determination.
No, it's within the text. It's actually it says explicitly planning commission needs to make a finding of fact based on these criteria. So it's in there. No one's going to be surprised when we bring up that it needs to be consistent with the master plan for rezoning. That's the first thing that should be in there, and that was absent. So it's pretty clear that the applicant needs to respond to these when they submit the application, and that the planning commission needs to consider all of these criteria and then make a finding of fact based on it.
And then for the land use one, because residential and the ag are very much the same. Like I say, I've seen it in so many of the other ones. They kind of throw what nobody wants to see in the ag, like nobody's going to notice. But schools and universities, they don't belong in ag. There's a whole list of stuff that's in there that basically, if you just ask yourself, does that belong on a main road, or does that belong 5 miles down a dirt road? That kind of tells you what you need to take off right there. When you put those types of activities out there, farming and agriculture just are useless. So anything that when you're reading...
I don't know that we can restrict schools on.
Oh, absolutely. Private schools?
Oh, private.
Private schools and colleges?
Okay, private. I'll agree with you. I thought for a minute you were talking about public. You can't.
No, private.
Because they can go on any residential zone piece of property. A public school can.
Right, yeah, well,
under state law. We didn't
there's
write,
some things going on with that too, but
we didn't write that law. That's in place still though, right now. Okay, you're talking more in a private situation. We will, we're not through with looking at all the use classifications and those categories yet. We just happen to have only so much time today that we started with on the yard waste composting components that we had heard a lot about. We're going to and we want to completely remove it and put it in some other areas. We just want to make sure that we have some of the right or correct definitions to work with us in that regard, so where we can't just let people come in helter-skelter and put whatever they want someplace, either in any district, either it be I-1 or whatever the district is we put it into. So what the law doesn't let you do is completely just not put something in any district.
right. Well, so my point was, a lot of it, the kind of activities are there along your main road on pavement and that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the thinking we're looking at.
I hate to admit it, but in Oxford, we don't have too many main roads.
Well, we don't. We really don't. But
We
that
really
also
don't.
is a reason where certain things can be restricted.
I'm just being upfront about it. We don't have too
And
many.
there are, just to break with yard, although we're leaning now towards taking it out, the yard composting facility there's both a special land use and had, I think, 2 pages of supplemental standards that needed to be met.
Right.
So, and that's the case with a lot of these special land uses, that while it is a special land use, these supplemental standards are really restricting where they can be located on top of the other special land use standards that need to be met.
Well, so that the people who live near Scott's. So, yes and no. But it's a use that, if it's there, is not compatible with the type of use you're trying to preserve up there. And we're talking about like that overlay concept. As our, auction yards, repair facilities, those type of things. You really need to think small agribusiness and preservation of a unique character, and find the rest of the stuff that's on there and put it in a district that's more compatible. And the same thing goes, if you wouldn't want it next to your house,
Yeah, I agree.
shouldn't be next to a
That's what I said earlier today. Would you want something like that next to your house? No.
So, do you want me to talk to Jan about getting these 2 on?
They were, at least from what I get from the joint meeting where the township board did take action, they did approve the amended list.
No, I know, but for us to see
Oh, you mean
the planning commission.
Yeah, we have, the draft is ready to go. I just need to put it into a clean format.
Okay.
So if you do want to have a planning commission meeting next
Just say the next available.
available one, those can be ready for
We'll
that.
have it available.
Whenever
It'll
that
be
is.
available for the next available planning commission meeting.
Okay, good.
Got 2 availables in there.
Yeah. Okay, item 12, Sharp Engineering isn't here. Matt, anything else?
No, I just want to also, we started with the audit today, but it's an audit of the uses, but it's also, within this, I think we're going to have to incorporate a lot of new definitions. We just don't have, half of the uses that are in our ordinance aren't defined. And that sets up a disaster for administration, because that leaves the zoning administrator basically to make an interpretation of whether it counts. Then they have to record it, which they should be doing anyway. They need to record their action for future, but it just makes it more difficult. When if you look at it, if it's properly defined in the zoning ordinance, it meets that definition or it doesn't. So I think we need to set aside some time with the RSC meetings to also analyze the definitions that go along with those uses.
Good. Fair enough. Okay, and then with that, we are adjourned at 7:35.